Thank you, Atheist Foundation of Australia, for putting on this wonderful event. All you people going to hell in one handbasket here. An amazing thing you have done. Thank you also, David and Lee and Mary Gilroy, wherever she is. She picked me and Annie Laurie up at the airport and drove us down to Lorne, where we had a few days of seeing the beautiful, not God's country, but the beautiful godless country of Australia, the oceans, the cliffs. We saw koala bears in the trees. We saw the birds. We saw the 12 apostles, which are crumbling, by the way. Religion is crumbling. And thank you, Shelley Siegel, for driving us to go see the penguins the other night. Shelley's going to be singing tomorrow night. We saw a lot of wonderful sights. We also saw, by the way, I'm going to move away. I spent so many years in the pulpit. I think I'm going to leave the pulpit behind here and come out here. We also saw a creationist. Annie Laurie and I went down to Cape Otway, and we went up that beautiful lighthouse. Have any of you ever seen that lighthouse? You go up the circle all the way to the top. And we got up there, and it was gorgeous scenery. And they have this guy. It's not a functioning lighthouse anymore, but they have this lighthouse keeper up there anyway, this kind of salty old guy, you know. And he asked us, why did you come to Australia? I said, this was Annie Laurie's first visit to Australia, and it's beautiful here. And she said, well, we're here for the Global Atheist Conference. And he said, atheist, what's that? And Annie Laurie said, we don't believe in God. We're people who don't believe in God. And he said, why don't you believe in God? And I said, well, if there were a God, we wouldn't need lighthouses, would we? And Annie Laurie explained a little bit more, and he went on to say, and we thought maybe we should be getting down the stairs now. He wanted to argue, and he said, well, where did we come from? Where did we come from? And as I was going down the stairs, I said, well, my mom and dad fell in love and had sex, and here I am. So Leslie is right. There's a lot of work to do in Australia. The religious right does want to take over, and don't let them do it. Don't let them barge into the schools and use our schools as mission fields. And read about Vashti McCollum. Read the book she wrote. It's called One Woman's Fight, where she tells about her little boy sitting out in the hallway. She fought, and you can fight back as well. When I was here 2 years ago, I told the story of my own deconversion, leaving the pulpit behind. The motivation that drove me into the pulpit was the same motivation that drove me out. That was to know the truth and speak the truth. I learned painfully through a gradual process that what I was preaching is simply not true. If it's not true, why preach it? I loved it. I was a co-pastor of 3 different churches. I got a degree in religion, was ordained to the ministry. I was a missionary to Mexico for more than 2 years, trying to convert Catholics into Christians. And it worked. I was a cross-country evangelist, a Christian songwriter. I lived the life. In fact, I'm still getting royalties today. And I told this. But I want you to know I put the money to good use. I got a check. It's not much money anymore, but I wrote a musical called Mary Had a Little Lamb. And last year I got a check for like $1,017. And so I signed it over to the Women's Medical Fund, which is a charity run by Annie Laurie's mother, Ann Gaylor, the longest-lived abortion charity in the United States. And the bookkeeper asked me, should we send the thank you letter to the Christian publisher? And I said, go ahead. So in my book, Godless, I tell that whole story about why I changed my mind, why I studied, why I deconverted, why I eventually dumped out all the bathwater, and I said, hey, there's no baby there. You know, it's just a book. It's just empty teachings, and I'm not the only one. There are thousands and thousands of ministers and priests and clergy who are struggling with their faith. They're actually learning too much. They're studying too much about their faith. And later in this conference, Dan Dennett is going to talk to you a little bit about this new group called the Clergy Project. It's nice that there's a new group that you don't have to join. It's a group of former and active clergy, priests, ministers, rabbis, a couple of pastors' wives, one former imam in the group. We started last year with about 50 former and active clergy. Today there are more than 200. It's called the Clergy Project, and it's helping to save a preacher. So, and they're going through immense struggles right now. There are people in the pulpit preaching who don't believe, but they can't just get out right now. They've got health insurance, and they have family to support, and they have commitments, and so they're like I was for 4 or 5 months, really admitted hypocrites in the pulpit, not believing a word of what they're saying and wishing they could find who's going to hire somebody with a divinity degree in this economy. So it's a tough deal. Right now there are more than 200 in the group. About 50 of those are active clergy. You'll be hearing more about the Clergy Project later as we get more and more off the ground. But today I want to talk not about my first book, Godless, which tells my story, but I want to talk about my next book. It's The Good Atheist. I wanted to call that book Life-Driven Purpose, which is the title of my topic today. But the publishers were a little nervous that if I called it Life-Driven Purpose, guess who might sue us? Do you know about Rick Warren? Do you know the book he wrote called Purpose-Driven Life? In fact, if you look in the back of the book, you'll see they have this disclaimer. This has nothing to do with his book. I thought Life-Driven Purpose would be a greater title, but The Good Atheist is the title they picked. And it's good not so much in the sense of moral good, but good in the sense of practical good. All the good things that atheists are doing and have done around the world to make the world a better place in so many ways, in science and in the arts and in humanities and in charity and in music, and how the world has been enriched by the contributions of good atheists. But how many of you have read Rick Warren's book, The Purpose-Driven Life? I hope you haven't. I decided to read it in writing this book. And you know what the purpose of life is? If you read this whole book, it's an immensely popular book. In fact, my born-again brother Tom loves that book. He sent a copy to my dad, who's an atheist now, and Dad sort of read 2 chapters and said, thanks, but don't bother reading the book. I'll tell you what the purpose of life is, according to Rick Warren. Can you guess? It's to know God, to glorify God, to go to church, and to bring others to church with you. That's it. That's the purpose of life, according to Rick Warren. Doesn't that make you feel? Who's snoring out there? You sat through too many sermons, didn't you? To glorify God. That's the purpose of life, according to Rick Warren, and according to the Bible, basically, to glorify God. What does that mean, to glorify? To worship, to praise, to bow down before, to magnify, to say, you are great, you are everything, and we are nothing. We are your humble servants. I suspect there aren't too many people in this room with that attitude. To glorify, basically, is to bow down before a slave master. A master who tells you what your purpose is. A master who dictates to you, like a military leader who says, here's how you fit into the army or to the navy or whatever. This is your place. And then you say, oh, I have my role in life. I know what to do now. I can be a good servant of the Lord. Have you ever noticed the postures of prayer? What are they? What are the postures of prayer? The head is bowed. The knees are bent. You're down prostrate before this master. You are no threat at all. You're humble. And this. What is this all about? The hands together. The wrists are shackled together. That's what slaves are. Slaves are shackled. Their hands are like this. They are no threat to the slave master. One thing slave masters fear is a slave revolt. And that's one thing we are doing as atheists in this world. We are revolting against the slave master. We're saying, wait a minute. We are not slaves. We don't bow down. In my country, we fought a proudly rebellious revolutionary war, kicking the king off the shores, kicking the dictator, the lord, the master, Instead of having a constitution that's based on some sovereign authority, some divine leadership, or some church of whatever, we turned it upside down and said, nope, we the people, we rule our own lives. That's profoundly anti-biblical. You don't find those concepts anywhere in the Bible. In the Bible, we are all worms, we are slaves, we are sinners, we must submit. Like I used to preach from the pulpit, that to be a good, humble servant, that someday you'll go to heaven and hear those phrases, good job, my humble servant. And you can say, yes, I did a good job for the Daddy, for the Lord. So, and yet in my country, there are still a lot of people who still want to bow down before the king that we kicked off our shores. So glorifying God is supposed to be the purpose according to the Bible. I used to preach John 3:16. How many of you know that verse? For God so loved the world. Did some of you go to Sunday school and stay awake? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. There are a couple of good Sunday school students here. And I thought, that is good news. I stood on park benches. I stood in pulpits. I traveled knocking on doors. I went into prisons to tell these prisoners how free they are in Jesus. All across Mexico and across the United States, preaching this good news that the world needs to hear, this great news. I'm going to tell you in a minute what the truly good news is, the good news that we atheists offer to the world. But the good news I used to preach as a Christian minister was basically this. Suppose I were to walk out on my front porch and you're walking by and I say, hey, I've got some good news for you, some great news. Stop. You've been walking by all these days and you've been ignoring me, and I deserve to be acknowledged. I deserve to be noticed. I'm somebody. I'm important. And you just keep walking by. You're not even paying any attention to me. So I've got some good news for you. You don't have to go down in my basement. That's right. This is great news because you've been ignoring me all this time and you've not been giving me the proper respect that I deserve. It made me so angry, and I'm an angry person when I don't get honored and when my goodness is not respected. So I built this torture chamber down in my basement. And there's some icky, smelly vats down there, and there's some sharp knives, and it's kind of dark, and there's the furnace with flames growing, and there's these chains, and it's horrible and it's ugly, but you don't have to go down there. This is great news. You don't have to. I sent my son down there. And it was ugly. It was horrible. It was a passion of the Christ. It was bloody. But that satisfied my anger. And I'm not mad anymore, okay? I got all that taken care of. So it's all over. This is great news. So all you have to do, come on up here to my porch and just come on up here and tell my son thank you for the great thing he did for you. And come up and give us a hug, and we'll welcome you into our house, and we'll live up in the attic forever. And you can tell me how great I am, and you can thank my son for it. Wouldn't that be just wonderful news? Aren't you happy to know that? So what would you do? Would you just keep walking, or would you? Sorry, I've got to get to work. That's supposedly the good news. I also used to preach, of course, that the great news is that without religion, we can't be moral. We can't be good people. And we've all heard that phrase, that we need some kind of, we are these animals with these base instincts that we want to kill and rape and steal. Like all of you, I can see it. You're just restraining yourself from doing these horrible things, aren't you? But you need this sort of these commandments to come down from a mountain. You need this to basically tell us these things. I've done 98 public debates now since I became an atheist. 7 of them were with Dinesh D'Souza, if you know who that is. And he and I are doing another one this fall. So it might be the 100th debate I do with him, but we did one at the University of Wisconsin a couple years ago. And I made the comment that contrary to the teachings from the pulpit, religion does not enhance your moral judgment. Religion compromises your moral judgment. Religion gets in the way. Religion is an added layer, it's an obstruction. And I said to that audience, I'm going to prove to you that religion is compromising your moral judgment. There were about 1,500 people there, and Madison is a pretty liberal town, and I bet maybe 30 or 40% of that audience were non-believers. But I said, I'm going to tell you 2 stories, and I want you to raise your hand after each story. The first story is this, and these 2 stories are morally equivalent. Suppose I were to break into somebody's home, this loving Christian family, mother, father, and children, and pets. They go to church, they pray, they contribute to charity. They're really, really great people. And I tied them up, and I tortured them, and I drowned the cat in the bathtub, and I shoot the dog, and then I set the house on fire and kill all those people. And then the police asked me, Dan, why did you do that? And I would say, no reason. The devil made me do it. Raise your hands if you think I'm a moral monster. Virtually every hand went up, right? Yeah, horrible, moral monster. How would he do? No reason. The devil made me do it. The second story was this. I got out my Bible and I opened the Bible to the book of Job. And you know what's coming. Remember how God tortured Job. He caused a wind to blow the building over. The wall crashed against those children and killed his children, killed his livestock and his animals. And it didn't say if he had a cat to drown, but he killed it all. And then God tortured Job with boils and horrible things that happened. If you want a magic bullet, by the way, that totally destroys Christianity in the Bible, you will find it in one Bible verse. It's the book of Job 2:3, the second chapter, verse 3. Let me read this to you. The Lord said unto Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a blameless and an upright man, that fears God. He turns away from evil, and still he holds fast his perfection. He holds fast his integrity. God said this to Satan, and then he said, although you moved me against him to destroy him without cause. So God, why did you do this to Job? No reason. The devil made me do it. So then I asked that audience, okay, raise your hands if you think the God of the Bible is a moral monster. Can you guess what happened? Less than half of the hands went up in that audience. Isn't that proof that religion compromises our moral judgment? We are loyal to the slave master. We are loyal to the Lord. We don't want to threaten. We don't want to say anything bad about the Father. We submit. We become these humble servants of the Lord, and we'll let him figure all these things out. In my book, The Good Atheist, I talk not about a purpose-driven life, not that life has to have something from outside of it, but that there is a life-driven purpose. It's the other way around. The good news that we atheists offer to the world, I think, one of the good news, there's a lot of them, but in this regard, I think, and this news is so surprising and so non-intuitive that a lot of people are going to say, huh? But I think the truly great news, after years of preaching the gospel, the truly great news we should be saying to the world is, there is no purpose of life. And that's good. Yes, it's true that life is survival and reproduction and that, but that's more of a definition of life. It's not the purpose of life. If there's a God, what's the purpose of God? You know, if there's a God, he gets to determine his own purposes, right? It's wonderful that there's no purpose of life, because if there were, we would be secondary. We would be subservient. We would be looking for the marching orders. We would be, tell me what I need to do, how do I fit in, what is the purpose of my life, or what is the meaning of my life? And yet, those of you who are in this room, I think most of you would say it's wonderful that life is just its own reward. We are biological organisms in a natural environment. We have our instincts, we have our fears, we have our hungers, we have our needs, our drives, our wants, our social instincts and all that thing. That's what we are. And we want to survive, and we do reproduce, and we want to make the world a better place in some way. But that's not a purpose of life. Those are purposes in life. We don't need some morality from on high to tell us how should we act. I was in the Detroit airport back in the late 80s. I went to be a guest on the Phil Donahue show. It was a show about the afterlife, and there was the fundamentalist Bible thumper, there was a Wiccan priestess, there was a Universalist priest, and there was me, the atheist. But before I got to the show, I was in the airport in Detroit, waiting to get on the plane, and there was another line of people over here to go in another gate. And I don't know, I was probably thinking about the show, and out of the corner of my eye, I must have noticed, there's this young couple over here, and they had a little baby, and they had their luggage in one of these carrier things about this high, and they had the baby in a little baby carrier on top of the suitcase, about like this. And the father must have wandered away or something, because the corner of my eye saw that baby kick in that carrier rolled off the top of the luggage. And with no thought, I saw myself just like that. My fingertips caught that thing as it was turning in the air, and then I grabbed the other side, and about a second later, the mother grabbed it too. She would have been too late. And I stood there, and what I said to her was, that was scary. Now, there was no forethought, there was no planning. I wasn't standing there contemplating how I can be a good moral witness to the world. I wasn't thinking about Jesus or glorifying God. I wasn't thinking about, what does Allah want me to do in this world today? I was just a human animal there. I was watching myself act. I was not deliberating. I was not thinking. I was not weighing the consequences and coming up with some moral philosophy that if we consider the relative values and the merits, I just acted. I just did that. And I bet everyone in this room would have done the same thing. You naturally would have acted for preserving the species. I think it's because our ancestors, those who were better at preserving the babies from falling, produced more offspring than those that didn't. So we come prepackaged with instincts like this. When I grabbed that thing, I held onto it really tight. I almost didn't want to let the mother, of course I gave the baby back to the mother, but you should have seen the look she gave her husband too. But did I say to her, okay lady, I did you a good deed, now you owe me. Reciprocal altruism here. Now, I want you to know, or did I say to her, by the way, I'm doing this to show you how good we atheists can be in the world? Was any of that crossing my mind? It was just a natural thing. And of course, we come with violent instincts as well, but we come prepackaged with these basic general, most of us who are mentally healthy, and I think most people in this room are, we just naturally know what goodness is within ourselves. So there's no moral code from outside. It comes from within us. So as long as there are problems to solve, like falling babies, or traffic accidents, or hunger, disease, if there's disease in the world, oppression, the suppression of human rights, you name it. What are some of the problems that we're facing in our world today? There are many of them. Maybe one of your siblings dies of some horrible rare disease. You devote your life to fighting that disease. It wasn't something that was handed to you from on high. It happened in life. So as long as there are problems to solve, knowledge to gain, beauty to create, think of all the beautiful songs and music created by non-believers. Many of the songs that we all sing, and many of the songs that mark our passages in life, from Brahms's Lullaby to Elgar's Pomp and Circumstances as you're graduating, to Doe a deer, a female deer, and somewhere over the rainbow, and Verdi's Requiem, and all these beautiful music that we all love, written by non-believers who have enriched the world. Who's to say that those people did not have purpose in their lives? Who's to say that Elizabeth Cady Stanton did not have a life of purpose? An atheist, a woman who fought for a half a century to guarantee that women could participate in the democratic country. What a concept, right? And she was fought by the church this whole time. Who's to say that someone like Elizabeth Cady Stanton did not have a life-driven purpose? As long as there are problems, and there are many, we all can live lives of immense purpose and of immense meaning. So watch for the Clergy Project. Some of these people are going to be needing help. You can find out more about the Clergy Project at theclergyproject.org. And more about the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which has immense purpose in trying to keep state and church separate. You can find us at ffrf.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Now, questions, let's see. Looking into the audience. And we have down, yes, you have to go to the people with microphones. Oh, we have one over here. Okay, let's start over here.
Yes, I was just wondering if you might think it's a good idea to expand your view of being altruistic beyond our own species. You say you caught the baby, and that's good because it helps our species to, survive. But as humans, I know many of us would probably also help to save a monkey, a baby this, a baby that. So when you talk about altruism, I know reciprocity from that act may not be forthcoming from a monkey or a spider or something, but what's your view on that? Should we be more altruistic, more morally interested in other species?
Yes, that little baby that I grabbed was not a relative of mine. It was some distant cousin, I suppose. We had a common ancestor somewhere. I didn't know that family. They might have been Republicans, And by the way, we have a lot of good Republicans in our group, so I'm not picking on Republicans. There's a lot of atheists who are in all different political parties. But the other species on this planet are also cousins of ours as well. We all can go back to a maybe further common mother ancestor. So yes, the basic idea I think most of us have of morality is to minimize harm, to increase well-being in this world. And we are a part of a total global environment. We are interconnected. So yes, of course. And I think what it comes down to is we have different personalities. I think on the bell curve of human psychology and altruism, some of you just more easily break into tears when you, for example, when you see cruelty to animals, some of you in this room will break into tears. Don't do that. Or some of you will break into a rage, like my sister-in-law. But there might be others in this room, and don't raise your hand, who just psychologically just don't care as much. And maybe there's even a few that might even enjoy seeing that happen. So we can try to combat that with education. It's important to live in a world where there's as much well-being as possible for all of us on this planet.
Another question up there?
How can we take the argument without accepting the premise or playing by the rules of the religious? When you debated George Pell, you called him George. You didn't call him Eminence or Cool Hat or whatever that guy wants to be called. And I love that. What can we do to kind of raise the consciousness of not accepting their norms and not accepting their, just the premise?
Yeah, stop pretending that there's different levels of humans, that there's a higher level of clergy that are above us. And you're right about George Pell. Before the debate, he said, I can call you Dan, and I said, and I can call you George, okay. Everybody there was calling him His Eminence, and and I think he didn't like being treated as an equal human being. The clergy like their status. They like the benefits. One of the lawsuits we're taking in the United States is to take away a tax benefit that clergy get. They don't have to report. Clergy don't have to report their housing as income. That's an amazing benefit they get. So I was so glad. I got a call from a former imam in the UK. I don't even know his real name, but he said, it's so nice to just be talking to you as an equal human being. I don't have to pity you. I'm not below you or above you. We're just the same in this planet. And so, let's give respect where respect is due, but not just to a title. Reverend. I hated that word reverend, even when I was a reverend. I didn't want to be revered like I was special. So let's respect them, and we don't have to always put them down. We can put down their views, and we should ridicule their views without ridiculing them. I think the views are ridiculous, but treat people commonly is all. This sounds like a cliche, but we're all brothers and sisters on the same planet.
And we have time for one more up there.
Hi, I actually have two parts to this. The first part, again, is with your catching the baby. In a sense, are you trying to say that there's an absolute conscious morality regardless of religion, or is it actually a build-up or created by our environment with the morals, and a lot of that sometimes can come from religions that helps people build that morality to have a subconscious that will react straight away while you're catching a baby. Same as, I guess, an atheist will say no, it's because of our own ethical reasonability. So that's the first part. And the second part is that my friend wants to know when and what made you change from changing into an atheist.
Read the book. I learned that Christianity is not true, and I learned that there's no evidence for a God. There's no good argument for a God. Like Bertrand Russell said, it's all just bad grammar. I learned that there's no coherent definition of a God, that there's no agreement among believers as to the nature or moral principles of this God. And I learned that there's no good reply to the problem of evil. There's not. There's a number of theodicies, and then I learned there's no need for God. Millions of people live good, happy, moral lives without it. So that's really making a long story short. But I think you're right about morality. I think it's a combination. I think Peter Singer and most scholars and that would agree that nature and nurture, it's both. So you can live in a culture where you're inculcated with certain quote-unquote moral things, and then you might view these people as subhuman and not want to catch the baby that's falling. That could happen, I suppose. But I think naturally most of us that are healthy have these sort of built-in instincts that we inherited from our ancestors who then were better able to survive. We're stuck with some of these things. It's like I could not reach for that baby. I mean, most of you would feel the same way, wouldn't you? You could not do it. There's something, and above and beyond all that, we also develop moral philosophies. We can think through things. We can come up with some utilitarianism, or in my case, a kind of negative utilitarianism, not the greatest good for the greatest amount, but the least amount of harm. The minimizing of harm in the world is the floor for morality. It's a mere morality. So it has to be a combination of both. We are instinctive animals, but we also are learning animals. So both of those things fit together.